I thought I was walking into my 30th birthday party. Instead, I walked into a courtroom. 40 people. Folding chairs. My father holding papers. My mother holding a microphone. They called it an intervention. By midnight, 6 of those people were permanently out of my life. And not one of them saw it coming. If you've ever had family dress-up control as concern, if you've ever been publicly shamed in the name of love, if you've ever realized the people who raised you don't actually see you, stay with me. Because what happened that night didn't just end relationships, it ended a version of me that was still trying to earn their approval. They thought they were exposing me. They didn't know. I had already seen the script. Before I tell you what they accused me of, comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping peace or keeping your dignity, stay until the end. Because at 11:59 p.m. I made a choice that changed everything. I remember thinking the skyline looked softer that night. Chicago in early May has a way of pretending everything is gentle. The wind off the lake was warm enough to be forgiving, cool enough to keep you alert. The rooftop restaurant Ethan had reserved glowed gold under hanging Edison bulbs, and for a moment, just one long breath, I let myself believe this was exactly what turning 30 was supposed to feel like. There were 40 people, coworkers, a few college friends, my parents, Natalie, even Hannah, who'd insisted on coordinating little surprise touches. Champagne flutes clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. The city hummed below us. 30, Ethan said, brushing his thumb over my knuckles. You look terrifyingly calm about it. I've been training for this my whole life, I joked. That was half true. My mother, Elaine, stood near the dessert table, surveying the room like a principal monitoring a school dance. Her smile was polished, perfectly timed, slightly tight at the corners. She'd worn navy, of course, authority blue. Claire, she called gently, motioning me over. Your father wants to speak with you before the toast. My father never wanted to speak. He summoned. Richard stood near the railing, holding a glass of sparkling water instead of champagne. He rarely drank at events. Said someone needed to stay clear-headed. You look happy, he said, studying me carefully. Not admiring. Evaluating. I am? He nodded slowly, as if filing that away for future reference. 30 is a serious age, he added. It's when consequences start to compound. I laughed lightly. That sounds ominous. It's realistic. Behind him, I noticed Natalie lifting her phone. She wasn't taking random snapshots like everyone else. She had it angled steady lens fixed toward us. Toward me. Nat, I called out. Documenting my aging process already? She grinned. Memories are important. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. I turned back to my father. Are you two planning a dramatic toast or something? Your mother has a few words, he replied. We just want what's best for you. There it was. That phrase. We just want what's best. It had followed me my entire life like a polite shadow. Across the rooftop, Hannah was whispering to my mom. Ethan was speaking quietly to one of my coworkers, but his eyes flicked toward me more often than usual. Relax, I told myself silently. It's just a birthday. I reached for a champagne flute from a passing server, feeling the cool stem against my fingers. The bubbles rose clean and bright, catching the light like tiny promises. Natalie shifted her position again. Still filming. Make sure you get my good side, I teased. Oh, I will, she replied. The wind lifted slightly, carrying laughter and the distant sound of traffic. For a split second, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not yet. Just awareness. My mother tapped her glass with a spoon. The sound was thin, sharp, deliberate. And suddenly, every camera in the room turned toward the center, including Natalie's. I didn't know it then, but that was the last normal sound I would hear that night. My mother didn't rush. She never did when she wanted attention. She waited until the last fork clinked against porcelain, until conversations faded into polite silence. The city stretched behind her like a stage backdrop. Natalie moved slightly to get a clearer angle. 30 years ago, my mother began, her voice warm, almost trembling, I became a mother for the first time. There were soft smiles, a few AWs. She was good at this. Always had been. Claire was determined from the moment she could walk, she continued. Strong-willed, independent. So independent, in fact, that we've sometimes worried about her. A light chuckle rippled through the crowd. I smiled, played along. She looked at me then, not with affection, with something measured. Parenting doesn't stop when your child turns 18, or 25, or even 30. It evolves. That word landed differently. Evolves. My father stepped closer beside her. He hadn't been holding a drink before. Now he held a single folded sheet of paper. He didn't look at me. He looked at the room. As parents, he said, voice steady, we have a responsibility to speak up when we see patterns that concern us. There it was. Concern. The air shifted. It was subtle, but undeniable. Ethan's hand tightened around mine under the table. My mother nodded gently. Tonight isn't just about celebrating Claire. It's about loving her enough to be honest. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. My sister didn't blink. The red recording light on her phone glowed steadily. My pulse slowed instead of quickened. That was the strange part. I didn't feel panicked. I felt alert. My father unfolded the paper. This past year, he continued, Claire has made a series of decisions that have caused us deep concern. I heard the word again. Concern. Not disagreement. Not curiosity. Concern. As if I were unstable. As if I were fragile. As her family. My mother added softly. We cannot stay silent anymore. Stay silent about what? I scanned the faces around me. Some confused. Some uncomfortable. One or two nodding like they'd been briefed. Briefed. That word hit me harder than concern. My father glanced at Natalie. She adjusted her grip on the phone. This isn't easy, he said. But we believe the people who love Claire deserve to understand what's really happening. What's really happening? I felt the first flicker of something sharp in my chest. Not fear. Recognition. This wasn't a toast. This was structured. Planned. Ethan leaned closer to my ear. They're going there, he whispered. Going where? My mother inhaled, steadied herself dramatically. We've gathered everyone here, she said, because Claire needs help. And suddenly, the word hovered in the air before it fully formed. Help. I didn't stand. I didn't protest. I just watched my father lift the microphone fully to his mouth. And that's when he said it. This is an intervention. The word didn't echo. It absorbed. This is an intervention. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The microphone carried it clean and sterile across the rooftop, turning a birthday dinner into something clinical. A few people gasped softly. Others straightened in their chairs, suddenly aware they were participants in something they hadn't consented to. I set my champagne flute down very carefully. My mother reached for my hand. I know this feels sudden, she said gently into the mic, her voice coated in practiced compassion. But Claire, sweetheart, this comes from love. She squeezed my fingers like I might bolt. I didn't. My father glanced at the paper in his hand. For months, he continued, we've watched you spiral. Spiral. The word struck harder than intervention. I'm sorry, what? I said, not loudly, but clearly. He didn't look at me. He addressed the crowd. Claire has been making erratic financial decisions. She's distanced herself from family. She's become defensive when questioned. And most concerning of all, he paused deliberately. She's entered a relationship we believe is deeply unhealthy. Every head turned toward Ethan. He didn't flinch. My mother leaned in again. "We've tried speaking to her privately," she said. "She refuses to listen." That was a lie. Not a distortion. A lie. "We are not attacking you," my father added calmly. "We are offering support." Support felt a lot like indictment. Natalie stepped closer, angling the phone toward my face now. Not toward them. Toward me. "Claire," my mother said softly, performing tenderness for the room. "We're worried about your stability." There it was. The accusation underneath the concern. My stability. A murmur spread across the tables. One of my coworkers whispered something to the person beside him. I caught the word therapy. Therapy. Interesting. My father cleared his throat. "We've consulted professionals." "Professionals?" "We've gathered statements," he continued, lifting the paper slightly. "Statements. Plural." The room felt smaller. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I could see the structure now. The scaffolding behind the performance. This wasn't emotional. It was procedural. My mother's eyes shone with carefully controlled tears. "Claire, honey, you don't have to pretend anymore." "Pretend what?" Ethan finally stood. "Can you clarify what exactly she's pretending?" he asked evenly. My father's jaw tightened. "This isn't about you," he replied. "That's where you're wrong," Ethan said quietly. The wind picked up slightly, rattling the hanging lights. I looked around the rooftop at people who had shown up with gifts and champagne and expectation, at faces caught between curiosity and discomfort. Then I looked back at my father. "You said you gathered statements," I said calmly. "From who?" He hesitated, just for a second. And in that second I saw it. Not certainty. Preparation. "From people who care about you," my mother answered quickly. Natalie didn't lower the camera. Hannah avoided my eyes. My pulse remained steady. Spiral. Unstable. Intervention. They had chosen their narrative carefully. What they didn't know was that I had mine, and they had just made the first mistake. My father unfolded the paper fully this time. The sound was small, almost polite. "Claire," he said, now addressing me directly, "you've withdrawn over the past 6 months. You've made significant financial transfers without consulting family. You've isolated yourself from support systems." "Support systems? You mean you?" I said evenly. A ripple of discomfort passed through the tables. My mother inhaled sharply. "This defensiveness is exactly what we're talking about." My father continued as if I hadn't spoken. "You liquidated a joint investment account." Joint. It wasn't joint. It was in my name, and redirected funds into a private trust. There it was. Money. Ethan's posture shifted slightly. My father held up the paper. "We have documentation of behavior that suggests instability." "That's vague," Ethan said calmly. My mother's eyes flashed. "We are not debating you tonight." "Then what are you doing?" he replied. Ignoring him, my father read aloud. "Concerns have been raised about Claire's emotional volatility, mood swings, impulsive decisions, distorted perception of support." He lowered the paper. "These statements come from people who love you." Silence. And then Hannah stood up. Of all people. She smoothed down her dress and stepped closer to my parents. "I didn't want to speak," she said softly, eyes glistening in that perfectly calibrated way she had. "But I've been worried too." The world didn't tilt, it sharpened. "What exactly are you worried about?" I asked. She looked at me like I was fragile. "You've changed, Claire. You're not the same. You don't listen. You push people away." Push people away. Since when does setting boundaries count as instability? I asked quietly. That's not fair, she replied. You stopped confiding in me. You've been secretive. Defensive. Secretive. About what? My sister stepped forward next. I didn't want it to come to this, Natalie said, holding the phone steady. But I've seen the late-night texts, the financial stress, the therapy appointments you didn't tell anyone about. Therapy. There it was again. Several heads turned toward me. My mother nodded sadly. Claire has been seeing a therapist and hiding it. A murmur spread. I almost laughed. You're accusing me of instability because I go to therapy? My father's jaw tightened. You concealed it. I didn't announce it at Thanksgiving, I replied. There's a difference. Hannah crossed her arms, visibly shaken but not with doubt, with commitment. She had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. The pieces aligned quickly in my head. Statements, professionals, therapy, financial transfers. They weren't worried about my mental health. They were worried about my independence. My father lifted the mic again. There's more, he said. Of course there was. And that's when I realized this wasn't about helping me. This was about discrediting me. And at least 3 people in this room already knew exactly what was coming next. There's more, my father repeated. He looked out at the crowd as if he were about to present quarterly earnings. We asked a few of you to share your observations. The sentence didn't land immediately. Then it did. Asked. Past tense. He hadn't just gathered statements. He'd recruited witnesses. My stomach didn't drop. It tightened. Tom, my father said calmly, nodding toward one of my coworkers. Tom looked stunned for half a second, then resigned. He stood slowly, adjusting his jacket. I didn't know this would be like this, he began awkwardly, but since your parents asked. He glanced at me apologetically. Claire's been different at work lately. More guarded, less collaborative. She pulled out of a group investment opportunity without warning. I stared at him. That was a risk assessment decision, I said evenly. He shrugged slightly. It felt abrupt. Felt. My mother nodded sympathetically. Abrupt changes are often warning signs. Warning signs. Natalie zoomed in. My father scanned the room again. Anyone else? Anyone else. The phrase turned the dinner into a tribunal. For a moment, no one moved. Then, an older relative, my Aunt Linda, stood up slowly. I love you, Claire, she said gently. But you've been distant from family gatherings. We barely see you anymore. Because every gathering turns into performance reviews, I thought. I've been working, I replied calmly. And avoiding us, she said. A murmur spread again. The sound wasn't loud, but it was collective. Agreement doesn't need volume. It needs repetition. My father lifted his chin slightly. Isolation. Financial secrecy. Emotional volatility. He wasn't improvising. He was reading from structure. My eyes flicked toward the table near him. That's when I saw it. Not just the paper in his hand. A small stack beside the dessert tray. Printed copies. Stapled. Identical. My breath slowed. They hadn't just planned to accuse me, they planned to distribute. Are those for the room? I asked, nodding toward the stack. My mother's lips tightened just slightly. They're summaries, she said, so everyone understands the context. Context. Ethan leaned closer to me. You see it too, he whispered. Yes. This wasn't a spontaneous outpouring of concern. It was curated. Statements gathered, language aligned, therapy weaponized, financial choices reframed, witnesses primed, and the camera always recording. This wasn't about helping me. It was about building consensus. If enough people nodded, I would look unstable by default. That was the trap. Public agreement as proof. My father reached for the stack. I think it's important, he said calmly, that everyone here sees the full picture. And as he picked up the first copy, I realized something else. They weren't just trying to save me, they were trying to document me. My father began passing the papers down the nearest table. They didn't flutter loosely like spontaneous notes. They were clean, center-aligned, formatted. I stood slowly and stepped closer before anyone could fully scan the first page. "May I?" I asked, holding out my hand. For a fraction of a second he hesitated. Then he gave me one. The top read, "Intervention Summary, Claire Morgan." Summary. Like I was a case file. Below that, bullet points, behavioral changes, financial irregularities, emotional volatility, isolation patterns. The same words repeated from the microphone. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the formatting. Certain phrases were bolded, others italicized. There were small handwritten notes in the margins. Pause here. Let Elaine speak. Invite outside perspective. Invite outside perspective. My throat didn't tighten. My vision sharpened. This wasn't concern, it was choreography. I flipped to the second page. Under the therapy section, there was a line highlighted in yellow. Recent escalation in secrecy regarding mental health appointments. Escalation. Secrecy. The language wasn't emotional, it was diagnostic. And at the bottom of the page, a date. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. This had been rehearsed for at least 3 weeks. I glanced toward Natalie. She wasn't just filming casually. She was following structure. Adjusting when speakers changed. Anticipating reactions. Scripted. Hannah stepped closer behind my mother, as if positioning herself for her cue. I looked back down at the paper. Under suggested closing statement. My father had underlined, "We are offering help before things get worse." Before things get worse. Worse than what? I turned the page again. There was a section labeled Expected Reactions. Denial. Defensiveness. Minimization. Each followed by a response strategy. If Claire denies, emphasize love. If Claire becomes emotional, redirect to support. If Claire deflects, reference documented behavior. Documented behavior. They had prepared for my reactions before I had even spoken. That was the real accusation. Not instability, predictability. They thought they knew exactly how I would respond. I felt Ethan's presence beside me. "You okay?" He murmured quietly. I nodded once. Better than okay. Because now I understood something crucial. This wasn't an emotional ambush. It was a controlled narrative. And controlled narratives have weak points. I looked up at my father, still holding the microphone, still confident in the momentum of the room. He thought this document gave him authority, but all it gave me was proof. Proof that this wasn't spontaneous love, it was premeditated humiliation. I folded the packet neatly, then I smiled. And that's when my father realized I wasn't reacting the way the script predicted. Smiling was not in their plan. I could see it ripple outward confusion first, then recalibration. My mother blinked twice, searching for the next cue. My father adjusted his grip on the microphone. "Claire," he said carefully, "this is a safe space." Safe. I turned slowly and looked around the rooftop. No one was smiling anymore. People who had been leaning toward me earlier were now leaning back. Not dramatically, just subtly. Chairs angled slightly away, shoulders shifting, conversations that avoided my name. Isolation doesn't arrive loudly, it rearranges proximity. Tom avoided eye contact completely. Aunt Linda pressed her napkin into her lap as if bracing for impact. A few co-workers were whispering, not maliciously, just uncertainly. Uncertainty can be crueler than accusation. Natalie kept filming. Always filming. My father cleared his throat again. "We're not here to embarrass you." The irony was almost elegant. You invited 40 people, I said calmly. You printed summaries. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My mother stepped closer. Claire, sweetheart, denial is natural. There it was. Expected reaction number one. Deny to emphasize love. She was following the script. I scanned the room again. Something had changed. Not hostility, distance. The more they spoke, the more the crowd leaned toward the safety of neutrality. And neutrality, in moments like this, feels like abandonment. I felt Ethan's hand at my back, not possessive, steady. But even he hadn't spoken again. He was calculating. Good. Let them keep talking. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Once. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Natalie's lens followed my face, searching for cracks. My father resumed. We've consulted professionals who believe early intervention prevents escalation. Escalation. I slipped my phone out discreetly under the table. One new message. Unknown number. I opened it. You're being set up. Check your email from 3 weeks ago. M. My pulse did something new then. Not panic. Alignment. M. Only one person I knew signed messages like that. Monica. Former colleague. She hadn't been invited tonight, which meant she knew something. I didn't look up immediately. I read the message twice. You're being set up. Not worried. Not concerned. Set up. That word felt cleaner, sharper, more accurate. My mother reached for my arm again, squeezing gently. Claire, please say something. I lifted my eyes slowly. I will, I said. And for the first time that night, I wasn't responding. I was preparing. Because if Monica was texting me now, then this script had a leak. And leaks turn narratives into liabilities. I didn't react to the text. That was the first rule of surviving controlled rooms. Never give them the reaction they're waiting for. Instead, I looked back up at my parents, still framed by skyline and string lights, still convinced the momentum belonged to them. You've been distant, my mother continued gently. You've hidden therapy appointments. Hidden, as if healing required disclosure forms. My phone rested in my palm beneath the table. I didn't open my email yet. I didn't need to. 3 weeks ago. That date aligned perfectly with the timestamp on the intervention summary. 3 weeks ago, I'd received an email from my father titled, Financial Clarification. I hadn't responded. Not because I was unstable, because I'd noticed something odd. He had CC'd someone unfamiliar, an address ending in a legal consulting domain. At the time, I'd archived it. Now it wasn't odd. It was foundational. Ethan leaned slightly closer to me. I was going to tell you tonight, he murmured quietly, barely moving his lips. Tell me what? I whispered back. I saw your dad at my office 2 weeks ago. My pulse steadied even more. Doing what? He requested background verification. On you. Not on me. On him. He asked about my contracts, my revenue structure, my client retention. I inhaled slowly. They were building a risk profile, Ethan said calmly. Of course they were. Financial instability, emotional volatility, unhealthy relationship. It was a cohesive narrative, not improvised, engineered. My father resumed reading from the summary. Claire has made decisions that indicate impaired judgment. Impaired judgment, like choosing a partner they couldn't control. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Monica. Forwarded you the original draft your sister edited. Check attachment. Original draft. Edited. That meant Natalie wasn't just filming. She had helped write it. I finally opened my email under the table. Monica's forwarded message loaded quickly. Subject line, intervention outline, draft. Date, 22 days ago. Attachment, PDF. I didn't open the PDF yet. I didn't need to. The title alone was enough. Outline. Draft. This wasn't spontaneous concern, it was project management. I slipped my phone back into my clutch. My father's voice continued, steady and authoritative. And as difficult as this is, he said, we need Claire to acknowledge that she may not be thinking clearly. May not be thinking clearly. I stood up slowly, not abruptly, not defensively, just enough to shift eye level. The crowd quieted instantly. Natalie's camera adjusted upward. My mother's smile tightened. Claire, she said softly, this is your moment to accept help. I looked at the skyline for half a second, then back at the room. Can I say something? I asked. And for the first time that night, they didn't have a prepared answer for that. Can I say something? My father hesitated. That was new. He handed me the microphone not out of generosity, but because refusing would look worse. I didn't take the paper from him. I didn't raise my voice. I want to thank you, I began calmly. That caught everyone off guard. A few brows lifted. My mother blinked again. For organizing such a detailed event, I continued. The formatting is impressive. The rehearsal notes are thorough. My father's jaw tightened. I'm serious, I said. You've clearly invested time. A soft ripple of uncertainty moved through the tables. I just have one question, I added. When did you decide I was unstable? The word landed differently when I said it. Silence. My father cleared his throat. This isn't about labeling. No, I interrupted gently. It is. Words matter. I turned slowly, making eye contact with a few guests. 3 weeks ago, you drafted an outline titled Intervention. You consulted legal advisors. You performed background checks on Ethan. Several heads turned sharply toward my father. You printed summaries. I held up the packet. And you included predicted reaction responses. I flipped the page lightly. Denial, defensiveness, minimization. The wind carried the faint rustle of paper. You prepared for me to disagree. My mother stepped forward. Claire, please don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything, I said calmly. I'm identifying a pattern. Pattern. That word was heavier than spiral. I've been told I'm too independent since I was 17. I continued. When I chose a college you didn't approve of, I was impulsive. When I declined to join the family investment fund, I was ungrateful. When I moved out of state, I was abandoning support. I paused deliberately. When I started therapy, I was unstable. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Therapy, I said clearly, is not evidence of instability. Someone near the back nodded slightly. I did liquidate an investment, I continued, because the risk assessment changed. That's not the issue, my father said tightly. It is, I replied, because you've reframed responsible decisions as symptoms. The room felt different now. Not sympathetic. Curious. I wasn't crying. I wasn't defensive. I wasn't escalating. I was outlining. You said you consulted professionals. I added calmly. Did those professionals evaluate me directly? My father didn't answer immediately. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. That half-second hesitation said more than any statement. You asked people here to share concerns, I continued. Did you ask them privately? Or did you show them this document first? Tom shifted in his chair. Aunt Linda looked down. I lowered the microphone slightly. This feels familiar, I said softly, because this isn't the first time disagreement has been treated like disorder. The wind lifted again, rattling the lights above us. My father stepped closer, trying to regain position. This is about love, he insisted. No, I said quietly. This is about control. And suddenly the word spiral didn't belong to me anymore. This is about control. The word hung there longer than spiral ever had. My father tried to recover first. That's a dramatic interpretation, he said, tone tightening. Is it? I asked quietly. I stepped closer to him, not confrontational, just close enough to make distance irrelevant. You mentioned financial irregularities, I continued. Let's clarify those. He stiffened. You liquidated a joint investment account, he repeated firmly. It wasn't joint, I said calmly. It was under my name. You were listed as an advisor. A subtle murmur moved through the tables. That's semantics, he replied. No, I said. That's ownership. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I reviewed the account structure 2 months ago, I continued, because I noticed something. My father's jaw tightened further. Transfers, I said. 3 of them, authorized digitally, from my account. His eyes flickered. Just once. To a consulting entity I didn't recognize. I turned my screen outward, not enough for everyone to see details, just enough to show it existed. I contacted the institution, I added calmly. They confirmed the authorization originated from an IP address registered to your office. The air shifted again. Sharper this time. That's absurd, my father snapped. It's documented, I replied. My mother stepped forward quickly. Claire, this is not the time. Actually, I said softly, this is exactly the time. Silence. You framed my financial independence as instability, I continued. But I liquidated that account after discovering unauthorized transfers. Tom's posture changed. Aunt Linda looked directly at my father for the first time. I didn't accuse you publicly, I added. I didn't print summaries. The wind moved between us, carrying tension instead of laughter now. I handled it privately, I said, because that's what stable people do. My father's grip on the microphone tightened visibly. That's a gross misrepresentation, he said sharply. You don't understand corporate structuring. I understand digital authorization logs, I replied. Ethan stepped forward slightly, not speaking yet. Just present. I also understand why you'd want to paint me as volatile, I added. Because if I look unstable, my credibility weakens. No one moved. No one whispered. The dynamic had shifted. Subtly, but decisively. This intervention, I continued calmly, happened 3 weeks after I requested clarification on those transfers. My mother's composure fractured for half a second. Coincidence? I asked. My father didn't answer. I lowered the phone slowly. You wanted to question my judgment, I said evenly. Let's question yours. The skyline behind us no longer felt decorative. It felt exposed. I handed the microphone back to him gently. Should I keep going? I asked. And for the first time that night, my father looked unsure. Should I keep going? The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My father adjusted the microphone again, buying time. There's been a misunderstanding, he said carefully. This isn't about business technicalities. Technicalities. The word almost made me smile. I didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, I stepped slightly to the side out of direct confrontation range. I don't want to turn this into a financial seminar, I said lightly. That would be boring. A faint, unexpected laugh escaped from somewhere near the back. Not mockery. Relief. I think what's more important, I continued calmly, is clarity. I held up the intervention packet again. You said you consulted professionals? I reminded him. Did any of those professionals evaluate me directly? He hesitated again. That's not how consultations work, he replied. So no? I asked. That's not relevant. It's directly relevant. The room had gone completely still now, because the tone had shifted. This wasn't emotional warfare anymore. It was cross-examination. You said you were worried about my mental health? I continued. Did any licensed professional diagnose me with instability? Silence. My mother stepped forward quickly. Claire, you're twisting. It's a simple question, I said gently. My father's shoulders stiffened. No, he admitted. The word dropped heavier than any accusation had. Thank you, I said quietly. Then I turned slightly toward the tables. So to clarify, I said evenly, this intervention is based on personal concern, not clinical evaluation. That sounded different when spoken plainly. Concern, not diagnosis. Opinion, not fact. Tom shifted uncomfortably again. Hannah looked pale. Natalie's camera wavered slightly for the first time. I go to therapy, I continued calmly. I manage my finances. I choose my partner. And I ask questions when money moves from my account. I let that settle. If those are signs of instability, I added softly, then we should redefine the term. My father attempted to regain control. This is exactly the defensiveness we anticipated, he said sharply. Anticipated. The word betrayed him. You anticipated my responses? I asked mildly. He realized too late what he'd said. You wrote predicted reactions into this packet, I added, lifting the paper again. You prepared counterpoints. A few heads turned fully toward him now. You prepared to discredit any disagreement, I continued. That landed. Because now it wasn't about me. It was about process. You didn't invite me into a conversation, I said quietly. You staged a conclusion. My mother's composure cracked slightly. We are trying to help you, she insisted. Help doesn't require an audience, I replied. The wind moved again, carrying silence across the rooftop. I looked directly at my father. If I had broken the law, I said calmly, you would have called a lawyer. If I were clinically unstable, you would have called a doctor. But you called a crowd. I let that breathe. Why? And that was the first question that truly had no safe answer. Why? For a moment, no one moved. The skyline behind us felt impossibly wide, and yet the space between my parents seemed to shrink. My mother answered first. Because you've been slipping, she said quickly, voice no longer soft-tight. You're pushing people away. You're making decisions without thinking about consequences. Consequences. I tilted my head slightly. Consequences for who? I asked. That wasn't in the script. I saw it in her eyes. The search. The recalculation. My father stepped in to stabilize. We are protecting you, he said firmly. From isolation. From financial exploitation. From emotional harm. Exploitation. That word was new. Are you implying Ethan is exploiting me? I asked evenly. A few guests visibly straightened. My mother didn't answer directly. We've seen patterns before, she said instead. Patterns. She was borrowing my language now. Desperation often disguises itself as confidence. Which patterns? I asked. You fall hard, she replied sharply. You detach from family. You make dramatic shifts. There it was. Not instability. Autonomy. You mean, I said quietly, I choose differently than you would. That's not the same thing, she snapped. Her voice cracked on the last word. There. The first fracture. The room felt it. My father tried to regain ground. This conversation is proof, he said. You're combative. You're reframing everything. Reframing. I'm clarifying, I corrected. Then I did something small but irreversible. I pulled out my phone again. Since we're discussing patterns, I said calmly, let's talk about rehearsal. My mother froze. My father's expression changed instantly. There was no rehearsal, he said quickly. I opened the forwarded email Monica had sent me. Subject line visible, intervention outline, draft. Date, 22 days ago. I turned the screen outward just enough for the first few rows to see. I have the original draft, I said evenly. with edits. Hannah inhaled sharply behind my mother. That sound told me everything. I also have margin notes, I continued, including who would speak after whom. Natalie's grip on the phone tightened. My father's voice hardened. That was a private family discussion. So is this supposed to be? I replied calmly. A few guests exchanged glances now, not confused. Aware. You wrote predicted responses, I added, including if Claire denies, emphasize love. My mother's composure slipped fully then. You're humiliating us, she said. I blinked. No, I replied softly. You did that yourselves. Silence pressed down across the rooftop. My father's authority no longer felt solid. It felt defensive. I glanced toward the tables. Should we read the draft together? I asked. And this time the room didn't look at me. They looked at them. Should we read the draft? No one answered. Not my father, not my mother. The silence itself became evidence. I lowered my phone slowly. Actually, I said lightly, we don't need to. Confusion flickered across a few faces. My father exhaled, almost relieved. That's unnecessary theatrics, he said sharply. I agree, Ethan said quietly. And then he stepped forward. The movement was subtle but decisive. My mother stiffened. This isn't about you, she said quickly. It became about me, Ethan replied evenly, when you ran a background check on my business. A few guests inhaled sharply. My father's expression shifted, not denial. Calculation. That was standard due diligence, he said. For what? Ethan asked calmly. Dating your daughter? The wind moved sharply between us. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. I didn't plan to use this, he said quietly, glancing at me once. But you left me very little room. He pulled out his phone. I record most professional meetings, he continued, for documentation. My father's jaw locked. 2 weeks ago, Ethan said, Richard visited my office. I didn't look at my parents. I watched the crowd. Ethan tapped his screen. A voice crackled through the speaker. Clear. Controlled. Familiar. My father's. We need to assess long-term risk exposure, the recording said. If Claire continues aligning with him, it complicates the estate structure. Estate. Structure. Public concern will make her reconsider. The recorded voice continued calmly. She responds to pressure. The rooftop went still. No murmurs, no whispers, just the city breathing below us. That was taken out of context, my father said immediately. Ethan didn't argue. He let the next line play. If she appears unstable, the recording continued, legal leverage becomes easier. The air fractured. Not loudly, but definitively. My mother stepped backward slightly. That is not what you meant, she said quickly, voice thin. That's exactly what it sounds like, Aunt Linda said quietly from the table. Tom looked physically ill. Natalie's camera lowered an inch. My father stepped forward aggressively. You had no right to record that. You had no right to plan this, Ethan replied calmly. The power in the room had inverted completely. I hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. My father's own voice had done it for me. The word unstable no longer hovered over me. It hovered over him. And then from somewhere behind my mother, a shaky voice spoke. Wait, Hannah said. And that single word told me this wasn't the last layer. Wait. Hannah's voice wasn't confident. It was strained. All eyes turned toward her. She stepped forward slowly, smoothing her dress the way she always did before presenting something uncomfortable. This isn't how this was supposed to go, she said softly. Supposed to. I let that word sit there. What part? I asked calmly. She looked at my parents before answering. We weren't trying to hurt you, she said. We were trying to help you see what you wouldn't. Wouldn't. Not couldn't. Wouldn't. I tilted my head slightly. You helped draft it? I said evenly. Her face changed. Just slightly. I gave feedback, she replied. On the outline? I asked. Silence. I opened the forwarded PDF Monica had sent me and tapped the file details. Metadata doesn't lie, I said calmly. The document was created by Richard Morgan. I scrolled. Last edited by Natalie Morgan. Natalie's hand visibly tightened around her phone, and comments added from an email registered to Hannah Cole. There it was. Not accusation. Confirmation. Hannah's composure cracked. I was worried about you, she said quickly. You stopped talking to me. You shut me out. I set boundaries, I corrected gently. You changed, she insisted. Yes, I agreed. I did. That unsettled her more than denial would have. You told them about my therapy, I said quietly. Her eyes flickered. I thought they deserved context, she whispered. Context. That wasn't yours to give, I replied. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were watching. Natalie finally lowered her phone. You're twisting this, she said sharply. Am I? I asked calmly. I tapped the screen again. Page 3, I said. Comment thread. Natalie suggests adding emotional volatility under mental health. Natalie's face drained. That was wording, she snapped. It's not a crime. No, I agreed. It's coordination. My mother stepped forward desperately. You two were trying to protect her, she said. This isn't betrayal. Then why wasn't I included? I asked softly. That question cut deeper than accusation. Because protection doesn't require secrecy. Control does. Hannah's shoulders slumped. I didn't think it would get this big, she said quietly. Big. As if scale was the issue. I looked around the rooftop at people who had come to celebrate me and were now witnessing the disintegration of a narrative. You weren't helping me, I said calmly. You were helping them. The wind shifted again, and from the corner of my eye I saw Tom slowly stand up. There it was. Not redemption, but alignment. And I realized Hannah wasn't the last name on the list. Tom cleared his throat. The sound was small, but it carried. I need to say something, he said, stepping forward slowly. My father's shoulders stiffened. This isn't necessary, he interjected quickly. It is, Tom replied. That alone shifted something in the air. I didn't know this was structured, Tom continued, glancing at the printed packet in his hand. I was told Claire might be struggling, that this was supportive. Supportive? He shook his head slightly. I've worked with Claire for 5 years. She's decisive, strategic. If she pulled out of an investment, it's because she ran the numbers. A few coworkers nodded. That doesn't look unstable to me, he added. The room exhaled collectively, not loudly, but perceptibly. Aunt Linda stood next. I may not understand the financial details, she said carefully, but recording someone's partner and planning public pressure feels extreme. Extreme. My mother stepped forward quickly, eyes bright with sudden tears. This is being twisted, she said, voice trembling now. We are her parents. We are allowed to worry. Worry. Her tone had shifted from authority to injury. If this is what caring gets us, she continued, public humiliation and accusations. Humiliation. I almost admired the pivot. You organized this event, I said gently. You printed summaries. Her voice cracked further. Because you wouldn't listen. There it was. The real grievance. Non-compliance. I listened, I replied calmly. I disagreed. That distinction mattered. My father tried to reclaim the microphone again. This has gone far enough, he said sharply. Claire is proving our point. She's escalating. Escalating. I hadn't raised my voice once. Tom stepped slightly in front of the nearest table. With respect, he said carefully. This feels less like concern and more like control. The word control returned this time from someone else's mouth. That changed everything. Natalie's phone lowered completely now. Hannah had stepped back. My mother's tears no longer read as maternal. They read as tactical. I won't be villainized for caring about my daughter, she said shakily. No one is villainizing you, I replied softly. They're observing you. That silence was different. Not tense. Resolved. My father looked around the rooftop. The alignment had shifted. He saw it. The authority he entered with the certainty of majority was gone. His grip on the microphone tightened. And then, slowly, he lowered it. My father lowering the microphone should have been the end. It wasn't. It was the moment he realized silence was worse. He lifted it again, but differently this time. Not to command. To defend. This has been distorted, he said sharply. Financial structures are complex. Claire doesn't fully understand advisory permissions. Advisory permissions. There it was again, the subtle repositioning. I stepped forward one last time. You're right, I said calmly. Financial structures are complex. I unlocked my phone again dramatically, methodically. I requested transaction logs from the institution 2 weeks ago, I continued, including IP trace documentation. A visible ripple moved through the tables. Those logs confirm authorization came from your office terminal, I said evenly. That proves nothing, he snapped. Offices have multiple users. Yes, I agreed. I tapped once more, and each authorization requires dual authentication confirmation sent to the primary account holder. The silence turned surgical. I never received those confirmation prompts, I added. My mother inhaled sharply. That's because the contact email had been temporarily modified, I said. Gasps. Not loud, but undeniable. It was changed for 9 days, I continued calmly, to an address ending in your consulting domain. My father's composure fractured. That is a baseless accusation, he said loudly. It's documented, I replied. I didn't accuse him of fraud. I didn't threaten legal action. I simply described mechanics. And that was worse. You planned an intervention 3 weeks after I requested clarification on those transfers, I said quietly. The timing spoke for itself. Tom looked directly at my father now, not confused. Concerned. Real concern. Richard, he said slowly, is there something you need to clarify? The shift was complete. The word unstable no longer belonged to me. It hovered dangerously over him. This is absurd, my father said, voice rising. You're humiliating your own family. The irony was almost poetic. I didn't invite 40 witnesses, I replied. He looked around the rooftop. But the room wasn't his anymore. It wasn't hostile. It was distancing. And distance, I'd learned tonight, is power. My father opened his mouth again and stopped. Because there was nothing safe left to say. No script, no prepared counter. Just exposure. I stepped back slightly. I don't need to escalate this, I said calmly. The documentation exists. I let that settle. And institutions take unauthorized access seriously. The word institution landed heavier than any accusation had. Not drama. Consequence. The skyline no longer felt decorative. It felt like a witness. My father lowered the microphone again. But this time he didn't try to lift it. No one spoke for a full 5 seconds. 5 seconds is long when power has just shifted. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the room. At some point, I said quietly, this stopped being about concern. No one interrupted. It became about control, about narrative, about reputation. The city lights flickered below us, indifferent to family collapse. I'm not going to threaten anyone, I continued calmly. I'm not going to escalate. That wasn't mercy. It was clarity. I requested documentation because something felt off, I said. That's not instability. That's responsibility. I glanced briefly at my parents. I go to therapy because I believe in growth, I added. Not because I'm broken. A few people nodded openly now. And I choose my partner because I trust my judgment. Ethan stepped forward fully beside me. Not protective. Aligned. I'm not here to fight her family, he said evenly. I'm here because I respect her. Simple. Measured. That mattered more than volume ever could. I felt something settle in my chest, not adrenaline. Release. I'm not ashamed of my decisions, I said. I let that breathe. But I am finished defending them. The difference between those two sentences was everything. My mother tried one last time. Claire, sweetheart. No, I said gently. No anger. No volume. Just boundary. If you were worried about me, I continued, you would have called me. Not an audience. The wind moved softly across the rooftop. Tonight was a choice, I added. You chose spectacle. I paused. So now I'm choosing distance. The word landed clean. Distance. Not revenge, not punishment. Distance. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone one final time. No dramatic gestures, no shaking hands, just deliberate action. I've already separated my financial accounts, I said calmly. Changed legal permissions, updated beneficiary structures. My father's face tightened. I don't operate emotionally, I continued. I operate intentionally. The rooftop clock near the bar caught my eye. 11:57 p.m., 3 minutes until midnight. I turned 30 tonight, I said softly. And adulthood means recognizing when love is conditional. Silence held. This is where I stopped negotiating. The air didn't explode. It didn't need to. The fracture was complete. I checked the time again. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes left. And I realized they weren't losing control. They had already lost it. The rooftop clock ticked once. 11:59 p.m. The city below us continued as if nothing had fractured above it. I looked at my parents, then at the room. I'm not going to argue anymore, I said quietly. No one interrupted. I'm going to make something clear instead. I held the microphone gently, not like a weapon, like a conclusion. Tonight, 6 people lose access to my life. There was no gasp this time, only attention. My mother, I said first. Elaine's lips parted slightly. You don't lose me because you worried? I continued calmly. You lose me because you staged humiliation. Silence. My father. He didn't react outwardly, but his posture shifted. You don't lose me because of money, I said evenly. You lose me because you weaponized credibility. I turned slightly. My sister. Natalie's phone hung at her side now. You lose me because you helped script doubt. Her eyes glistened, but I didn't pause. Hannah. She flinched at the sound of her name. You lose me because you confused access with entitlement. The wind moved softly through the hanging lights. Tom. He blinked in surprise. You don't lose me permanently, I clarified calmly, but you lose professional access. Effective immediately. His shoulders dropped, not offended. Understanding. And Aunt Linda. Her face tightened. You lose the privilege of commentary on my personal decisions. That was 6. Not screamed. Not dramatized. Named. One by one. The room didn't erupt. It absorbed. I've updated financial permissions, I continued evenly. Changed emergency contacts, restricted shared digital access, revised legal proxies. My father's eyes flicked upward sharply. This isn't impulsive, I said calmly. It's structured. That word landed with intention. You assumed I would react emotionally tonight, I continued. You prepared for volatility. I let the irony breathe. But I prepared for clarity. The rooftop clock ticked again. 11:59 and 30 seconds. I'm not cutting people off to punish them, I said quietly. I'm adjusting access to protect myself. Ethan stood steady beside me, not speaking, just present. I don't need everyone in this room to agree, I added. I just need to stop negotiating my sanity. The wind shifted again. My mother whispered something, but it didn't reach the microphone. The city lights reflected in the glass railing like fractured stars. I'm turning 30, I said softly. And adulthood means recognizing when proximity is optional. The clock moved. 11:59 and 50 seconds. I handed the microphone back to the stand. No dramatic drop. No shaking hands. Just release. 5 seconds left. And for the first time that night, I felt nothing pulling at me. The rooftop clock clicked forward. 12 a.m. No fireworks. No applause. Just a quiet shift in air pressure as if the night itself had exhaled. I was 30. My mother didn't speak. My father didn't step forward. No one tried to reclaim the microphone. The intervention had dissolved not into chaos, into clarity. I didn't look back at the stack of printed summaries. I didn't look at Natalie's lowered phone. I didn't look at Hannah's tear-streaked face. I picked up my clutch. That's enough for tonight, I said softly. No anger, no shaking, just finality. Ethan fell into step beside me without asking. We walked toward the exit staircase slowly, not rushed, not fleeing. The crowd parted without drama. Some faces looked apologetic, some thoughtful. A few avoided my eyes entirely. That was fine. Proximity is earned. Halfway to the stairs, Tom stepped forward. Claire, he said quietly. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. I held his gaze for a moment. Accountability is always worth something, I replied gently. Not forgiveness? Not yet. But acknowledgement. We reached the stairwell. The city noise grew louder as the door opened. Before stepping through, my phone vibrated again. Findings. Discretion advised. I stared findings. Discretion advised. I stared at the message for a long second. Internal review, pending audit, consequences. Not because I threatened, because documentation exists. I slipped the phone back into my bag. What? Ethan asked softly. Nothing dramatic, I replied. Just structure correcting itself. We stepped into the stairwell. The rooftop door closed behind us with a quiet metallic click. The air in the stairwell was cooler, quieter, real. Halfway down I stopped. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I wanted to mark it. I turned to Ethan. They thought they were saving me, I said quietly. He brushed his thumb across my cheek gently. And? I smiled, not sharp, not triumphant. Free. They set me free. We continued down the stairs. No spectacle, no crowd, no script. Just the sound of our footsteps echoing against concrete. By midnight, 6 people were out of my life. Not because I was unstable, because I was done negotiating my stability. And as we stepped out into the Chicago night, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt aligned. There's a difference between concern and control. Concern invites conversation. Control stages conclusions. That night taught me something I should have learned years ago. Boundaries don't destroy families. They reveal them. When love is conditional, when it requires compliance, silence, or submission, it isn't protection. It's management. My parents believed authority gave them the right to narrate my stability. But adulthood isn't about proving you're stable. It's about deciding who gets access to you. Documentation isn't aggression. Therapy isn't weakness. Distance isn't cruelty. Sometimes the healthiest decision isn't reconciliation, it's restriction. I didn't lose 6 people that night. I lost the illusion that I needed their approval to feel legitimate. And once that illusion disappeared, so did the fear. If you've ever been labeled too sensitive, too independent, or too difficult for refusing control, you're not unstable. You're aware. And awareness is not something anyone else gets to diagnose. If this story resonated with you, share where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And tell me, have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping yourself?